Welcome everyone to this webinar called A Head Start, Maximising the Heads Up resource. My name's Marty Webber, Mentally Healthy Workplace Consultant at Return to Work SA, and I'm joined today by Catherine Doherty, Workplace Engagement Manager from Beyond Blue. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks, Marty. Happy to be here today.
So before we start the session, and in the spirit of reconciliation, Return to Work SA acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout South Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Catherine, I think you'd also like to give an acknowledgement.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I am in Melbourne, so I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And as Beyond Blue is an organisation of national reach, extend that acknowledgement to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia, and a special acknowledgement to those people watching the webinar.
Thank you, Catherine. So today's webinar is aimed at those workplaces that are looking at creating a more mentally healthy workplace. And in particular, we're going to deeply into the Heads Up website, developed by Beyond Blue and supported by the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance, so that you can learn really about the wide range of tools and resources and information that's available to assist your workplace to take action. I do find in my role at Return to Work SA that workplaces are all different stages when it comes to creating a mentally healthy workplace. But really this is a great website to really delve into and see what's useful for your workplace depending on where you're at in relation to that journey. So what we're going to do is firstly just give a little bit of an overview of each of the presenters. So as I said before, my role is Mentally Healthy Workplace Consultant at Return to Work SA, and I provide free assistance and support to South Australian workplaces that are looking to take action in the area of workplace mental health. So certainly if you want any more information at the end of the session, there will be my contact details. I work closely with Beyond Blue, and so I'm really pleased to be able to run this session today with Catherine Doherty. Catherine, do you want to just talk a little bit about your role at Beyond Blue?
Sure, Marty. So I'm an engagement manager at Beyond Blue, and I'm a member of a small workplace engagement team. So we work alongside and collaborate with organisations like Return to Work SA and other business chambers, business intermediaries, organisations who want to support workplaces to create mentally healthy workplaces so that we can help to amplify those messages and direct as many organisations as possible to the really useful resources that sit in the Heads Up website.
Excellent. So for those workplaces that perhaps maybe this is the first time they've heard of Heads Up and not quite sure about the background or the information to it, I'm wondering whether you could just provide a bit of a brief overview, Catherine, about how Heads Up was created.
Sure, yeah, that makes perfect sense. We do make some assumptions that it's a fairly well-known initiative, but it's possible that others are coming to it for the first time. And if they are, that's great. So in 2013, around then, the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance formed. So this was a group of that came together. So they were mental health organisations, they were business organisations, and it was the first time that the two sectors had come together with a shared purpose to improve mental health in a workplace context. So you can see on the screen, these are all of the logos and names of those key founding members, and they continue to work together to create and develop shared frameworks so that organisations and businesses can have kind of one source of truth. So Heads Up is kind of that single source of truth, if you like, of where organisations across Australia can go to for that sort of information. Beyond Blue developed the Heads Up website and Heads Up resources on behalf of the Mental Health Alliance and continues to keep those resources up to date and manage that website.
Excellent. And I think that the next slide, do you want to talk just about the next slide and maybe how Heads Up's set up?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Marty. So this is just the opening slide of the Heads Up website. So if you go to www.headsup.org.au, this is the first kind of landing page that you'll see. So let me just introduce, there's two ways to access the Heads Up website. So let me just help you kind of navigate those two entry points.
There are two main entry pathways through the Heads Up website. Firstly, through the tabs at the top, you can see there's the Home, section for healthy workplaces, looking after your own mental health, supporting others, and training resources and other information. So if you know the sort of information that you're looking for roughly, you could find that through these tabs. If you're not sure exactly what information you're looking for, but you're an employer, an employee, a manager or a small business owner, then these particular pathways might be more helpful to help direct you to the information that's relevant to your role and some of the concerns or information related specifically to workplace mental health as it applies to people in those types of roles in organisations.
Thanks, Catherine, for that overview of Heads Up and the navigation of the site. To help you guide through the webinar today, what we've done is we've set up the webinar what's according to what's called an integrated approach to better mental health, which really embraces best practice. And the integrated approach covers three key areas to creating a mentally healthy workplace. The first is promoting positive mental health. Secondly, protecting the mental health of staff by addressing risks and protective factors. And the third area is supporting employees with mental health conditions. But before we look at these three areas, we'll also be covering off on what resources are available to develop a more formalised workplace mental health and wellbeing strategy. For section 1, developing a formalised plan or strategy, and Catherine, certainly when I'm talking to workplaces in South Australia, a lot of workplaces now are looking at developing that more formalised mental health or wellbeing plan or strategy. So how can Heads Up help in this area?
Great question, Marty. There's lots of information on Heads Up that can assist. But before I just launch into that, I just want to give some context in terms of what we talk about in terms of what you would put into a strategy. So if we could just move to the next slide. Yeah, great, thanks. So there's kind of 4 key steps into creating that strategy. So it's that leadership support, identifying needs, developing a plan, and monitoring and reviewing, understanding what you're doing along the way, what works, learning from that, learning from what doesn't work, and demonstrating that shift in your organisation from where you're at to where you're going. And central to that are the 3 key pillars around leadership commitment, communication and participation, and also that the need to include employees, so that employee involvement and consultation through this process. So we can just go to the next slide. Great. So on the left of the screen, you can see that there's a booklet there. It's called Developing a Workplace Mental Health Strategy. Absolutely recommend that organisations download this strategy. It's the go-to guide that will step you through each of those elements. And then there's a section on Heads Up around strategies for healthy workplaces. So this section has lots of information. So let me take you through that in a little bit more detail now.
If we move to the tab on healthy workplaces, we can see there's a section called Strategies for Healthy Workplaces. If we click onto this section, this is where we'll find key information that will support organisations to develop a strategic approach to workplace mental health. Here on the left-hand side, we can see that there are 4 key steps in creating a mental health strategy for a workplace. The first step is to gain leadership support. Second step is to identify needs. Third step is develop a plan. And the fourth step is to monitor, review and improve. There's also a section where you can use templates that we provide to create your action plan. In step 3, there's more information about how to develop a plan. We encourage you to create a realistic plan, one that reflects the level of complexity in your workplace, the kind of risks that are evident in your workplace. Make sure that it's a plan that actually suits your needs and addresses those needs that you've identified in step 2. We're encouraging all organisations to think about including 3 key pillars in their plan. They are promotion, support and protection. Those key pillars combine to create an integrated approach. In this integrated approach diagram, you'll see that there are 7 key goals. And in this section, you can drill down further into each of those key goals. There's information at each point that can then link you to research information or information in other areas of the website. To get you started on developing your own workplace mental health strategy, I strongly recommend that you download this guide.
Great, thank you for that, Catherine. Section 2 of the webinar is about building a positive focus on mental health and wellbeing. So Catherine, what tools and resources are available on the Heads Up website to really help workplaces have this positive focus?
So Marty, there's a lot that workplaces can do, and there's lots of things that workplaces are already doing about good mental health practice for their staff. And so, there's been a lot of focus on physical health and the aspects of really supporting employees to look after their physical health. And we know that there's a really strong link between good physical health and good mental health. So some of those programs need to continue as well. But we also then need to get a bit deeper into what are some of the aspects around promoting ways to protect your own mental health and the mental health of friends and colleagues. So let me just take you through this section of the Heads Up website. So this is just the overview of this section on your mental health. Helps you understand what good mental health looks like and some tips on taking care of yourself. So let me just walk you through this section of Heads Up in a bit more detail.
In this section on your mental health, there's information about what's good mental health, how to take care of yourself, looking after yourself as a small business owner, working with a mental health condition if you have one, and deciding to tell others, and how to safely tell your story if you have a mental health condition and you want to share it with people at work. Let's first have a look at the taking care of yourself section. In this section, there's information to help you understand stress and taking care of your mental health at work, in social relationships, and in the way that you think. A really useful tool for individuals is the Beyond Blue Wellbeing Plan template. The other useful tool on this page that some people might need or need to suggest to others is the taking care of yourself after losing your job. If you find yourself in the unfortunate situation of having lost your job, being recently made unemployed, then this booklet helps to explain the mental health challenges and the journey, the ups and the downs, the very normal pathways and patterns that you might feel after you've lost your job, and then how to navigate through those. If you have a mental health condition, it can be difficult to decide whether to tell others or not. Information on this page helps you to weigh up the pros and the cons, helps you to map out the reasons that you would tell and the reasons not to tell. This is just a tool for individuals to use, or for colleagues or friends to share with people who have come to them for support, to help them identify whether they are in a position to tell other people. This interactive tool is quite helpful in weighing up those pros and cons. and helping you decide if you're ready to tell your employer or other people in your workplace.
That's excellent, Catherine. Thanks so much for that. Now, section 3 is addressing risks, reducing stigma and discrimination. And certainly when we talk about a mentally healthy workplace, it is a workplace that we would like it to be a positive contribution to our mental health and wellbeing. So we want to protect staff as much as we can from those workplace risk factors that can negatively impact on employees' health. For example, job stress, bullying and discrimination. And we also know that from the research I've read, certainly one of the key barriers to implementing a mentally healthy workplace is still stigma associated with mental health conditions. So this is a really important area. So how can Heads Up help in relation to addressing those risk factors, reducing stigma and discrimination?
All really good questions, Marty. I might just start with kind of a broader discussion about the risk areas of workplace mental health. And so what we can see and what we know is that there's some universal risks to mental health that are work-related or could be workplace-related. And so some of those are around, the role and the organisational environment, and then there are some key occupational hazards. If you can just click again, Marty, there's another element to this slide that identifies those protective factors. So when we talk about risks to mental health, there are some known risks, but there are known protective factors. Protective factors can offset those risks. So while we're saying, you need to address the risks, there's some opportunity to actually put some effort and energy into the protective factors that can actually help balance those risk factors and help to offset them if those risks can't be eliminated in their entirety. Now, this is quite a detailed slide. There will be people in our audience who like the detail. Others will just like to be able to kind of understand where to go for really simple and helpful tools and tips. So let me just walk you through in a bit more detail the areas in the Heads Up website that can identify where to find the information about the risk areas and answer those two questions around combat and to combat stigma and discrimination.
So if we go back to this section on healthy workplaces developing a plan, you'll remember that protection was the key element of the integrated approach, and addressing risks and protective factors and combating stigma were part of that integrated approach. They were two of the key goals. So there's information here relating to risks and protective factors, and here on combating stigma. The handiest tool, I would say, would be this 2-page document, PDF it is, so easily downloadable, on the 7 actions to help create a mentally healthy workplace. It drills down a bit more deeply into each of those 7 areas in that integrated approach. And the risk factors have been broken down into 3 main areas: work and organisational design factors, operational factors, and environmental factors. Work and operational organisational design factors includes things like role clarity, job control, resource allocation, skill development. Takes into consideration the individual factors and builds trust and equity and respect within work teams and workplaces, and demonstrates strong leadership and management capability to drive and support effective teams. Operational factors can occur across a whole different range of jobs and job roles. Some of those that are common are the likes with dealing with the public, exposure to occupational violence, shift work, working unseasonable hours and unsociable hours, and long working hours. And environmental factors are the typical health and safety risk type aspects around the environment and what are the environmental impacts that make doing that sort of work in that workplace difficult, and what's the impact then on mental well-being as a consequence. We also know that bullying is a risk factor for poor mental health, particularly workplace bullying. There has been cases where there's been a direct link between bullying behaviour, poor workplace mental health, and sadly, young people taking their lives. So, fostering an anti-bullying culture is really important. Look at the way that work is organised and teams are put together. Think about what are educating staff about bullying behaviour. What does that actually look like? What are the legal parameters around that? Putting together a bullying policy checklist. So just making sure that you've got the right guides and the right behaviours being demonstrated in your workplace. Combating stigma is about encouraging conversations in the workplace, encouraging safe, positive conversations about workplace mental health, inviting in a guest speaker, perhaps a Beyond Blue community speaker, to share their story about their experience with mental health. Help to normalise the conversation that people from all walks of life in all different levels of seniority and all different roles across all different industries do and have experienced poor mental health at times or ongoing, and they can still participate fully in the workplace. So just helping to debunk some of those myths.
Thanks, Catherine. Section 4 of the webinar, supporting employees with mental health conditions. And Catherine, in my role, I get a lot of queries from workplaces, particularly managers who are really keen to know how to support a team member with a mental health condition, or perhaps they see someone in the workplace that's stressed and struggling, and they really want to have that conversation with them. I know that Heads Up's got some great tools and resources in this area. So would you like to walk through what some of these resources are?
Sure, that's it's so important to have some skills and capability to support others. So you can see here that there is a section on Heads Up that is about supporting others, and this is relevant for colleagues and managers. But there's also another pathway for managers. So I'm going to take the audience through that pathway, which looks at what are the resources available for managers. So let me just go to that.
It can be really challenging for managers to respond to employees when they come to them and talk to them about experiences they might be having with their mental health. They might be having some temporary changes in the way that they're experiencing life. They might be experiencing stress, and that might be work-related or not work-related. In many instances, managers aren't well equipped or experienced, and many don't feel confident to have those conversations. In the instance where the manager might identify that there have been some changes in the way that the employee's behaving or performing, whether they might be a little bit more short-tempered or not taking care of their personal hygiene, not making decisions as quickly or as easily as they had in the past, or not meeting deadlines in the same way that they did before. Kind of attention to detail types of things. Then, managers need to be able to develop some skills and have some practices to step in quietly, privately, thoughtfully, carefully, have those conversations. So if you're a manager or you want to support your managers to be able to be better at having a conversation, then resources on the Heads Up website will definitely help them. And this is a good opportunity for us to follow through this pathway into those resources specifically for managers. So again, you might notice that here we are in the Healthy Workplaces tab, and we're in this section just for managers. This is specific for people if you manage others, what to look for, how to best support someone in your team that might be experiencing a mental health condition. This section helps you to learn some tools and take some strategies to check in and find out are they okay and have that meaningful conversation. Or how to go about just starting the conversation, preparing yourself for that conversation. Not so that you can be a clinician, but to understand a little bit so that you can have an informed conversation with your team members. The other other thing to remember, though, that it's really important to not think that you need to be a counsellor. You don't need to have all the answers. And it's really important in these conversations that you take steps to take care of yourself, and that you find ways to not take on board everything that your employees telling you, but to help them to navigate internal supports and external supports that can actually help progress them and help them take care of themselves. The other resources that managers find really helpful is how to actually plan and start a conversation if you've identified that your employee seems to be struggling. Some really good information through here on this page around starting a conversation. These can be really difficult conversations because lots of people just don't get the opportunity to do them very often, and so they're difficult because they're uncomfortable. And so having some strategies to prepare it, start it, and think about it in advance and prepare yourself to have the conversation can actually make it a bit easier. So here on this page we've got some really great tips on what do you say and how do you get started, how do you prepare for the conversation, where do you choose to have the conversation, to what time of day is convenient. Keeping in mind, you just want to have it in a quiet place that's where you're both equals. So some helpful tips here: how to start, how to listen effectively, and how to respond in a supportive way. Also have a think about what are the supports that you can suggest to the person that you're speaking with. What do you know? Does your organisation have an employee assistance program? Do you have a telephone number or a website that you can direct them to? Do you have the number on hand for Beyond Blue support services or Lifeline? Where can you help them get more information? Can you share with them the Heads Up website? Help them to identify where they might be able to get resources from the Looking After Yourself section that we've discussed already. As well as the information resources that we've just talked about that are available for managers through the Healthy Workplaces tab, there's also the training resources that Beyond Blue has. And there are 2 training modules in particular that relate to having a conversation or approaching someone in the workplace that you're concerned about. This first module here is one of our SCORM compliant modules. So all that means is that if your organisation has a learning management system where you can download workplace training content, then this module and this module 2 can actually be downloaded onto that and then disseminated across your organisation. These resources can all be accessed directly from this place on the Heads Up website. So just click on the link to access that resource. This goes through some different scenarios. There's also this resource as well called Having a Conversation. And in this resource, the training module is just set up differently. So one or other is suitable, one or other may appeal more to some people than the others, but they're both really good. This Having a Conversation module goes through 4 different scenarios, so different types of workplace examples. So one of those may be more suited or more aligned to the type of organisation that you work in, and therefore it might have more appeal to the managers or people in your organisation that might want to use it. The other resource that's helpful for managers to know is that this section here on helping others to stay at work. So, as I've said before, staying at work can be quite protective for people with a mental health condition or experiencing poor mental health. It provides stability, it provides routine, it provides connection. So finding ways that you can help your employee to remain at work are really helpful and important. There will always be barriers, and some of that might be barriers from the organisation, feeling nervous and inexperienced and unprepared, or barriers for the employee as well, fear about what colleagues might say, negative attitudes, and kind of experiencing stigma. But it's really important to develop a plan. So as you can see here, there's some useful steps in actually how do you develop a plan to keep someone at work if that's appropriate for them as part of their recovery. It might be that you need to develop a plan a bit later if they need to return to work, if they need to have a short or a longer period of time off. So key things to think about. Discuss what they need to be able to stay at work. What are some changes that they might need? What are some reasonable adjustments that might be necessary? And then come up with a plan and write that plan down and think about what's in the plan and what are some aspects about their work or their workload that need to be specified that they do and don't do. And then put in some times to review that plan so that you both have some clear parameters and boundaries and timeframes to work within. And there's a plan template here that you can download as a Word document. Making reasonable adjustments is captured under the Disability Discrimination Act. And so you might want to go back and have a look at what your legal rights and responsibilities are as well in relation to this. But some common adjustments to support someone with a mental health condition or experiencing poor mental health temporarily is around flexible working hours and perhaps where they work. So the time that they arrive or the time that they spend at work, so the length of their shift, might have to do with their workload and the stress that they're exposed to as part of that work. Going back to some of the risk ideas and risk elements that you've identified as part of your plan. What are some of those exposures that might be able to be reduced for this person at this time? And what are some other training or support opportunities that they have to be able to scaffold them to be able to come back and do their full workload, if that's appropriate, down the track. So some other helpful resources here relating to return to work, including a return to work website to support people with workplace mental health.
Thanks, Catherine. Great information there. So I know that I've been a fan of Heads Up for quite some time, and I did notice that that Heads Up have reviewed their website, and I thought one of the really fantastic things that was done was to really have a focus on small business. And so I think it's worthwhile just to highlight what resources there are available for small business, Catherine, if you wouldn't mind going through that today.
Yeah, absolutely, Marty. And there's a particular pathway for small business which I can demonstrate, and there are some new resources that went into this section this year to support small business owners and kind of intermediaries, other organisations or individuals that are supporting small business owners. So lots of information there. We know that small business is a really they need a particular attention because they have some shared but also some unique challenges. And the research that Beyond Blue has done with the small business sector and kind of indicates that, you know, the critical area to the success of a small business is the wellbeing and the mental health of the small business owner, because that dictates the function and the success of the small business. So in that whole business planning place to think about what keeps the small business owner well and what can actually support, what tools are available and resources to support the small business owner, and then extending that concept of a mentally healthy workplace within a kind of right-sized for small business is really important as well. So we've been able to take that research and translate that into some useful tools for small business owners. So I'm delighted to take you through those now.
There's a direct pathway here for small business owners and people who work in small business to be able to directly access resources that are really relevant and tailored to their needs and their experiences and reflect some of the particular challenges and opportunities that small businesses have. So let's take a look. So in this section under small business resources, this is where you will find some of Beyond Blue's most current, recently launched information for small business owners. This particular resource looks at actions for small business owners to improve their mental health and wellbeing. It helps them identify the personal signs and the at-work signs that might be impacting and keeping them well, and then it helps to identify through this continuum kind of heat map here on the left some of the personal signs and the at-work signs where it might indicate that they're struggling. It also includes here on the right some kind of clear actions that they can take and links to resources and supports that might be able to help them. So this is an interactive PDF. It doesn't work quite the same if it's printed, but if it's accessed online, then these live links can take you to resources to support some actions in each of these 3 key areas. The other key resources for small business owners, and in fact this one's relevant for individuals generally, is the personal wellbeing plan. So mapping out the things that you know that help to keep you well and the things that you know that might impact on your mental health, so that you can write down and articulate what the supports and what the protective factors are that you need to put in place and that you need to draw on to offset some of those stress and risk factors. There's also a really useful workplace wellbeing plan. The workplace wellbeing plan is intended to be used in conjunction with the personal wellbeing plan. And this plan aims to support small business owners who employ staff so that you can develop a plan to improve the mental wellbeing of their staff as well as themselves. There are 3 steps. And it's a simple version of how to create a workplace mental health plan, but tailored and targeted more effectively for small business owners, and to reflect the scale and complexity of a small business. If you're a friend or family member or an advisor supporting a small business owner, there's a resource here designed just for you. This is a guide for work contacts, their friends and family. Again, it's an interactive PDF so that it has live links in much the same way that we've talked about how to support an employee or a colleague. There's information in the Small Business Advisor's Guide about how to speak with someone that you're concerned about. That might be a client, might be a family member. And here are some solution-oriented steps to support that small business owner that you might be concerned about. So this is just a handy guide of just a few pages that can help an advisor or a family member or anyone who identifies that a small business owner is struggling, and to assist them to reach out and offer support.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm sure that's really useful information for small business. Are there any, we've covered quite a bit already. You've taken us through quite a lot of tools and resources. Is there anything else that you really want to highlight or point out to us today?
Sure, Marty. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we've covered quite a bit of the content, but absolutely not all of the content of Heads Up. I've tried to pick out the really key resources that will help your audience to kind of get past that first level of the resource information, dig a little bit deeper, but there will always be deeper and deeper areas to go. But I've tried to keep it kind of concise. So if we could just move to the next slide, I can just give an overview of some of the other resources that are available and interesting. So in this last tab around the training and resources, some useful information here for personal case studies and personal stories to help share information and case study information. So if organisations want to show a video of a personal experience, they can do that, and that helps to kind of lubricate the conversation. We've got some access to some online training programs. We've got some good webinars that we've done in the past. Marty, the webinar you and I did last year is there in that section there. And for the interest of our kind of audience today, that was a webinar on how to use the Toolbox Talk resources, and you'll see that they sit just here next to the kind of the Toolbox Talk. So, you know, there's information. It's really extensive on Heads Up, stats and data and evidence, if that's what you're looking for as well. So there's a lot for people in workplaces to tap into. We don't have the luxury of the time to go through everything in detail today, but it's safe to say we've given some in-depth areas and some kind of broad scope of where to go next.
And I think you've got a great getting started kit. Do you want to just a very quick overview of that, Catherine?
Sure, Marty. I do forget sometimes that this resource is here, but I do get positive feedback from organisations that use it. Initially, Beyond Blue put together some useful templates. So for an organisation that just wants to get started and doesn't have lots of internal resources, these might be helpful. So there's some kind of email templates here that maybe your senior leader will send out as a whole staff email or a communication. There's some sample policies to get you started, so you don't start with a blank page. That, you know, it still needs to be tailored for the organisation that you're in and reflect your needs. And then there's a few other booklet type information that you can tap into and download and share those with, you know, your employees or with your managers, or there's wallet cards and all sorts of other tips to get started. And, you know, I've already pointed out the 7 actions sheet. So that sits there in that getting started kit as well.
Thank you, Catherine. That has been absolutely fantastic. Has given the participants such a great insight into the range of tools and resources that are available on the Heads Up website for implementing a mentally healthy workplace. So I'd certainly encourage everyone to delve deeper into the Heads Up website and have a look yourself. Certainly join Heads Up. It's free. It only takes a few seconds. I know I've joined Heads Up. I receive a monthly newsletter that's got some great tips and tools and resources. And I think all of that really does help organisations to take action. Catherine, was there any final words that you wanted to say about Heads Up or joining Heads Up?
Just to point out, Marty, the intention of Heads Up is that it's not a program. So it's not intended that there's a particular starting point or a particular end point. It's set up as an initiative. So really it's designed so that anyone, anywhere in an organisation can find an entry point and tap in, find the information they need. The resources are intended to be self-directed. So they're written in plain English. They're intended to be informative and then translated into workplace good practice. And definitely so, and the Heads Up newsletter actually helps you to keep up to date then, and helps to point to any new resources that are added to the website and any other new research that might be happening in other mental health organisations across the country as well. So that's, yeah, a really good one to tap into, and we'll keep you up to date.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for being with us today. Just to remind everyone, that Heads Up website, www.headsup.org.au. And also just a final reminder for those people in South Australia, not to forget the Return to Work SA Employer Support Services. So if you are looking for any more assistance or support in the area of workplace mental health, mentally healthy workplaces, please don't hesitate to give me a ring or email me on mentallyhealthy@rtwsa.com. Or if you're really looking at how workplaces can support return to work of injured workers, then certainly contacting my colleague Huda Peters, and her details are there today. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Catherine. It's been great.
Thanks, Marty. It's been a really great.
Thank you.
Thank you.